All right, so good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this session on next level Viz and Tooltips. So who here has used Viz and Tooltips before? Please raise your hand. Oh, wow, everyone. Okay, so this feature was released about a year ago. And in the past year, there's been some amazing things that have been done with Viz and Tooltips by yourselves, by our community. And so today we want to take the hood off Viz and Tooltips, show you what's in the backend and how it all works. We want to show you some best practices on how to use Viz and Tooltips, so things like visualization best practices, but also performance. And then we're also going to show you some really cool examples from our community that you can find online and that we're going to kind of re-engineer with you so you see how they were built. So today I'm joined by the wonderful Jade Levent. Jade joined Tableau 3.5 years ago in the marketing department, and she's been one of the supporting members of the Tableau Public community. So she's been really helping our Tableau Public and our community to build really cool visualizations that they put on there. She's also, she was the sous-viser of the Iron Viz winner of 2017, the global Iron Viz winner, who was actually a Frenchman like we are. And she's, like I said, one of the backbones of Tableau Public. She has a great profile. I recommend you go and see that. And finally, Jade also is a multilingual speaker. She's actually presented Tableau in Spanish, in French, in English, and in Chinese, which I don't know how you would do that in Chinese, but anyways.
I won't do it today.
And so now Jade, after 3.5 years at Tableau, she's actually in the same team that I am. We're both in pre-sales, and we help our customers do the right things with Tableau and make sure that Tableau fits in their environment.
Okay, thank you, Gat, for this introduction. So let me introduce Gaetan quickly to you. He basically joined Tableau when he was a kid, 6 years ago. That's a real picture. And you can tell that he was young because he was really immature. He started as a pre-sales, then he moved into professional services, and then he's back into pre-sales, so really searching for himself. But that gave him a lot of experience. And so in his 6 years with Tableau, he's spoken at 12 Tableau conferences. He's supported 150 plus customers. He's taken lots of flights, including in some weird planes like this one. And he was one of the most traveled employees because he was covering Africa, the whole African continent, while he was based out of London. So that's another real picture. So it's a great pleasure to talk with Gaetan today. You can call him Gat, that's easier. Because he has expertise on everything Tableau, from server deployment to designing great Viz in Tooltip.
Thank you, Jade. So I'd like to start this session with a small quote from our very good friend Stefan Few. Stefan Few is one of the thought leaders in data visualization, and he wrote a few books, including this one, Information Dashboard Design. And what he said is the following. So fitting everything in without sacrificing meaning doesn't require muscle, but it requires finesse. And actually, for this session, I wanted to replace one part of this quote by Viz and Tooltip. So fitting everything requires actually Viz and Tooltip rather than finesse. So by the end of this session, hopefully, you will be able to use Viz and Tooltip to add detailed without cluttering your Viz and without making it too complex. You'll also be able to create effective interactivity in order to answer specific questions with the Viz and Tooltip. And then finally, be confident in using Viz and Tooltips in a variety of situations. So to achieve these goals, we're going to go through the following agenda. First of all, we're going to take you, Jade actually is going to take you through some basics, so the understanding of the logic of how Viz and Tooltips work, the markup, which is really the key component of how Viz and Tooltips work. It's the language we use to generate them. Then we're going to go through some more advanced examples with how you can make them interactive and using drill down examples with Viz and Tooltip. And then I'm going to take over and I will show you things, creative ideas from our community, like having multiple charts in Viz and Tooltips and some surprises that we'll show you later. And then finally, we'll end up with some do's and don'ts with Viz and Tooltips, so the best practices on performance and visualization best practice. Jade, over to you.
Yes, so let's start with the basics. This is a session where everyone knows a bit about Viz and Tooltips, but just in case some of you are still not very comfortable, I want to remind you of some stuff. And even those of you who have used Viz and Tooltip, you might still learn some things because you didn't necessarily think about the concepts behind Viz and Tooltip. So what is Viz and Tooltip and how does it work? This is not going to happen in Viz and Tooltip. So first Viz and Tooltip. Second level of Viz and Tooltip, not going to happen. We are not going to do Viz and Tooltip in Viz and Tooltip because Viz and Tooltip is actually just an image. The second thing that you need to know about Visin Tooltip is that it's actually an action filter. So what you're doing when you create a Visin Tooltip is that you are linking two sheets based on some dimensions that are passed as filters. So it's basically a filter action with the small difference that it will only happen on hover versus all the customization you can do for a filter action where you can click, hover, or select the menu. So once you know this, this will help you to understand some of the interactivity that we put in place. So I thought it was important to remind everyone of this. And then the order of operation, or the way Tableau processes a Visin Tooltip, is as follows. So the first thing when you hover over a mark which has a Visin Tooltip is that Tableau will trigger the Uber tip, which is the default tooltip, with the text and the possibility to filter on the dimensions that you click on. Then Tableau will filter the target sheet, so it will pass the dimensions from the source sheet to the target sheet as a query. And the third step is that Tableau will look for cached images of this exact tooltip to see if it exists, because if there is already a cached image, it will be much faster to render. And if there is no cached image, then Tableau will have to compute the visual model and then to render the image. So depending on how much stuff you have in that image, it might take some time. And this is something that Gat will cover in more detail in the best practices part. So let's move into Tableau after this quick refresh on what is a Visin Tooltip. And so here is our workbook, and I will share it with you on the screen. All right. So just to get everyone familiar with the geography of Berlin, we thought we would start with a tourist map, which will also give you some ideas if you haven't had time to visit the city and you're staying over after tonight. So here we are at the Estrel in New Cologne. This is this big yellow district. And what we did is use Visin Tooltip to actually put images of different points of interest for tourists in the Visin Tooltip. So you can see the Brandenburg Gate is not that far. The Reichstag, etc. And so if we look at the tooltip here, we see that what we are passing in the Visin Tooltip is the POI image sheet. So it's basically this sheet. And those are just custom icons that I imported in my folder, in my shape folder. I see people doing this, so you are all familiar with this. Very cool. And because the Visin Tooltip is being filtered based on what I hover on, then I just get the one image that I want. So that's just an example to get you familiar with the geography, and also a metaphor to help you remember that the Visin Tooltip is actually just an image. Let's view the markup in a bit more detail. So now we're moving into a more, not gloomy, but a bit more violent data set, because we are now looking at crime in Berlin. So that's open data from the Berlin police. And we have the details of the crimes by sub-district. So you see that we have more items on the map than in the previous one. So we have the district and the sub-districts. We have the types of crimes in this data set, and we also have the years. And so what we're going to do here is to bring in the sheets that shows the evolution over time of the crimes. So this is done by, sorry, I'll do it again because that might have been a bit fast. This is done by clicking on the tooltip button. Get rid of this existing one. You insert the sheets, so you go and you see all the different sheets that you have in your workbook, and you are able to insert the one that you want. Here, that's the year sheet. And you see, I'll make it bigger for you. You see that this markup is made of 4 different sections. The first one is the sheet name. Then you have the size portion, and then you have the filters. The sheet name is pretty straightforward. The only thing that you need to remember is that it has to be a capital S. So if for any reason you end up typing the markup by yourself, you need to put a capital S or this will not work. But of course, usually you will just insert the sheet directly from the menu, or you will copy-paste the code, as you will see later with Gat. Then you have the size portion, so max width and max height, that are by default 300 pixels. But you can modify them. So even if it's an image, you can still customize the markup to make the image fit the way you want. So if we look at the preview here with the default markup, we see that the view is too large to show if I keep the 300 by 300 pixels. So I can just increase that to, I'll put 600. And this is actually to help you remember that one advice for best practice is to not go beyond 600 pixels. Because if you do like 600 by 600, it will basically cover the whole chart that is below, and it will make the Visin tooltip ineffective. OK, so that's the size section. And then finally, we have the filter section. So you see that by default, it's showing all fields, which means that all the dimensions from the source sheet are going to be passed to the target sheet to the Visin tooltip. So here, what are the dimensions? That's basically the district and the district area. So if we check how this works, we see that indeed our Visin tooltip updates whenever I hover over a district. And I wanted to show you that you can actually decide which dimensions are passed on as a filter for the Visin tooltip. So all fields is the default, but let's say that you want to filter only on the district and not on the sub-district. Then you would just be able to insert the district here as a filter. It went all small. And now if I say to Tableau that I only want to filter on the district, you will see that as long as I stay in the same district, so Treptow-Köpenick here, the Visin tooltip will not change. So I modified the behavior of the Visin tooltip here. All right, last few things about the markup is that if I get rid of the filters whatsoever, it will not filter on anything, so it will keep the viz static wherever I hover. And if I get rid of the size and the filter area, the filter sections, you can do that. This will actually return to the default settings. So not necessarily something that you will use, but just so you know everything about the tooltip, and you can say that you're an expert tooltipper. OK. And one last point on this Visin tooltip is a filter action concept, is that I want to prove you this fact with a simple experiment. So I'm bringing the Visin tooltip that I'm bringing the chart that I have in my Visin tooltip below my map on a dashboard. And you will see that I haven't activated the use as filter icon. But because Visin tooltip is a filter action, it's filtering the chart below. All right, so now that you understand the concepts, we'll move into a slightly more difficult example or challenge that a customer gave to me a couple of months ago. And then we will go into the real advanced stuff. So this little challenge is that the customer had a dashboard where there was a filter action going on. So from one first chart, the one at the top here, to the bottom chart. And then the bottom chart had a Visin tooltip. And the challenge was that the customer wanted the Visin tooltip to update based on the filter action. But this filter action is at the dashboard level. And somehow, I can show you, it is not impacting the Visin tooltip because the Visin tooltip is not here on the dashboard. So you see here this map, the map of other crimes, is looking really really similar to the map of kidnappings, which is looking really similar to the map of drug offenses. And of course, you don't expect like drug offenses and kidnapping to be at the same level of frequency all over Berlin. So I was thinking a bit about how to solve this beautifully, and I had to use a very dirty trick. Like it's a bit of a workaround, but it does work. So the way I finally did it was to bring the Visin tooltip sheet onto my dashboard. So now it's part of my dashboard, it will get filtered. And because I don't want it to show, I just resorted to making it small. So I made it 1 pixel by 1 pixel. And because I'm really paranoid about it showing, like you never know if it's on the web, if you will have this weird pixel showing somewhere. So I just put it really far on the x-axis so it won't be visible on my chart. And so now it's still here on my dashboard. You can see that it's used in the dashboard, but it's so far and so small that no one will ever see it, but it will impact the Visin tooltip.
Something else as well that I'd like to add here. This trick that Jade used is also a trick that we use to solve performance issues. The reason is that when you add this sheet to the view, Tableau will actually load every single district and in the background, and therefore when you're going to be filtering on any of these districts, they're already going to be preloaded, or you could say pre-cached. So we're caching every single district data point, and then when you start filtering on this, if you have a very complex viz to generate, then because it's preloaded, it's going to be a lot quicker to generate.
True that. Okay. So now that you're very familiar with what a Visin tooltip is and how you can customize the markup, let's move into the more advanced examples that we have for you. So you will see a bit more of interactivity, drill down, and how we can combine the Visin tooltip with some other features of Tableau. So my first example will be to use a parameter to decide whether I'm going to show one viz or another viz in the Visin tooltip. And if we think of the Superstore dataset, for instance, that might be useful if you have a dashboard that will be used by the regional managers and the category managers, because they might want to see something different. The dashboard is the same, but they want to focus on their category or their region. So how do we do this? So I'll explain to you what we want to achieve, and then we will set it up together. So we would have this parameter here that allows us to choose between the different charts. And the charts that we are going to put in the Visin tooltip are those two charts. So let me show you the parameter that I've pre-created, because it's always boring to see someone typing on the screen. So it's basically called change Visin tooltip. It's a string, and it's giving me the name of the two sheets that I want to swap. Type of crime, evolution over time. And then I activate this parameter using a calculated field. So I'll open the field and make it bigger. And what I'm telling Tableau to do is that when my parameter is type of crime, then I want to display the sheet type of crime. So I put the full markup here. You will see that it has the sheet name, the size, and the filters. And then if the parameter is telling me evolution over time, then I want to display the other sheet. And that's it. Very easy. Let's see how it works. So now I will use this field into details, and I can now call it inside my tooltip. So I click tooltip. I insert directly this field, right, because I already have the whole markup. So this should work. Change tooltip viz with parameter. And let's see what happens. Here, my parameter is on evolution over time. So it makes sense that I'm saying the evolution over time. If I changed it to type of crime, then I get the type of crime. But are you noticing something? Is there something weird compared to what we saw before? Yeah, right? The Visin tooltip is not updating based on the district. Sad. The reason for this is that the calculated field string, when you pass it as a Visin tooltip, the filter part is not read by Tableau. So it's taking into account the size parameters, the sheet, but it's not reading the filter parameter as of now. This is something we hope to see improve in future versions. But for now, we will need to resort to another 1-by-1 pixel trick. So that's kind of a gimmick in this session. You've seen how I hid a viz on the dashboard by setting it to 1 pixel by 1 pixel. And I will actually do the same thing here. So I will call my evolution over time sheet and my type of crime sheet. If I use them as is, I will have this very ugly tooltip, which is not what I want, but you see that it does update now that I'm using the sheets here. And so to have the filters being passed onto the Visin tooltip, but without having those ugly sheets showing all at once, what I will do is I will set the max width and max height to 1 by 1 again. Sorry, up. And now you see that I'm on type of crime, it's updating. And if I move to evolution over time, it's also updating fine. The little drawback with using with the current way this is working and this workaround of the 1x1 pixel is that you get this little error message saying that the view is too large, but hopefully that's not something that will prevent you from using this tip. Because yeah, it's really useful if you have different audiences that want different context. That was the first advanced example. How is it so far? Not too advanced? Everyone's okay? Cool. Next one is, I'd say we will go from cool to cooler. So this one is going to be how to implement a different viz in Tooltip depending on whether you hover over a viz or whether you click you hover over a mark or you click on a mark. So what we will try to do is that when I hover, I get a specific sheet to show in the viz in Tooltip, which will be type of crime. So it's giving me a general context of this district. And then when I click on a district, I would want it to zoom on the district on a map. So let's say I'm new to Berlin and I want to visit, and I've noticed that the Alexanderplatz district area is kind of dangerous. It has a lot of crimes. So I want to know where it starts and where it ends. Berlin is not that dangerous, so let's say I'm going to Mexico City, I'm doing the same map in Mexico City. I really want to know where each district starts so I'm not kidnapped or anything. And so what I'm going to do is I need to tell Tableau how many marks are selected in the viz. And this will be done by using a conditional calculation that I will create here and make it bigger for you. So what I want this calculation to do is to count how many marks are selected throughout my view. Because it's across the view, I will need to use a window sum. Sorry, that's Gat used to be in London, so he has the English keyboard. All right, so I want to count across the view, but I want to count every single district area that's selected across the view, so it will be a count D within the window sum. And one last thing I need to do in this true or false is that I will tell Tableau that if it's equal to 1, I want it to be true. And why do I set it to 1 and not to equal or superior to 1? It's because the tooltip, it can only show for 1 mark. I cannot tell Tableau to show the tooltip with an aggregation based on how many marks I've selected. So I will set it to 1, which means that if I have 1 mark selected, this will be true. If I have 0 mark or more than 1 mark selected, this will be false. So that's the first step. And then the second step is that I have this swap tooltip field that I need to create. And that's basically the same as we had for the parameter trick. So the case will be if my condition is true, I want to show the zoomed map. If it's false, then I want to show the type of crime. So again, very similar to the previous one, I bring into detail. I add it as just the calculated field in my tooltip. Again, you will see that it should not be updating because the markup is not passing the filters. Okay, one step I forgot. You remember I used the table calculation, so it means I need to decide, I need to tell Tableau at what level I'm going to calculate. And here I want to calculate at the district area level, so I want to count how many districts are selected. And so now you see that when I hover, I get this. When I click, I get the district. It's not being filtered because I haven't done my 1x1 sheet trick. So let me pass the filters by adding the sheets here. So it's type of crimes and it's the zoomed map. I set it to 1. Okay, just making sure everyone at the back can see it. This is what it looks like. First my calculated field, then the sheets that I'm just bringing in to pass the filters. I can click OK, and so now let's see if it works. I hover, it gives me the type of crime. I click, it it takes a bit of time to load. Remember what I said at the beginning, we need to render an image that's a bit complex, so it will take slightly more time if it's a map. But this is basically what I wanted to do. Yeah, so how do you like it so far? Yeah? Cool. Of course, you don't have to use it on a map. You can think of other cases where it's useful. But we thought it would be interesting to help you avoid the crime area of Berlin. And one last thing, so here we are combining features, parameters with Visin Tooltip. We're combining set actions with Visin Tooltip. This is actually the case with set actions. So if you are not very familiar with set actions, how it works is that you need to create a set that will be a placeholder, and then you can reuse this set on any viz in your workbook, and the set will populate, and the values contained in the set will be passed on to the other charts. So here what I want to do is I want to be able to select a district area on the map and use this district area to split the number of crimes in my Visin Tooltip to say how many crimes were committed in this specific district. So I have this bar chart, and as I want to split the bar chart based on the district selected, I will need to create my set on district area. Create set. I'll select all values by default so that my bar will show all blue when nothing is selected, when I don't do any action. And I will use that set onto color here. So nothing changed, that's what I wanted. And what will change is when I will implement the set action in the worksheet. So I go for actions, add action. It's a change set value action, the new type of action available. And it works on this specific sheet based on this data source. And I wanted to fill in the district area set that I haven't renamed, but it's set 1. And so now when I click on a district, it will populate the set and it will impact the Visin Tooltip. So see, I have to click here because the set action is based on a click. And I'm selecting Alexanderplatz, which is the most dangerous area of Berlin, and you see that the blue section is the proportion of crimes that were committed in that area. I can slightly change it by bringing the blue part first, so it might be a bit easier to read. So I select Alexanderplatz again, put the Visin Tooltip, the in part first, and so it's already nice here because I can have an interactive Visin Tooltip. I can make my Visin Tooltip change. It's even nicer because now I can do multi-select.
Quick note, multi-select is actually not available with the default Visin Tooltip. For those of you who have tried, you can only just do it on one single mark.
Yes. Yeah, Tooltip is based on marks, one single mark. So here I can really push it a step further by selecting multiple marks and have my Visin Tooltip update. So you see that this northwest area of Berlin is almost 50% of the crimes in the city. So that's a really cool trick, and that will allow you to use set actions to make your Visin Tooltip even more interactive and do multi-select. So to recap these two parts, you learned that Visin Tooltip is a PNG that is based on the filter action. You learned that you can combine Visin Tooltip with parameters and set actions and have crazy calculations to really change how your Visin Tooltip will work based on what interactivity. And now I will leave the stage to Gat so he can tell you a bit more about creative ideas like combining multiple sheets in a dashboard.
That's correct. Thank you, Jade. She is wonderful. So for my part, I'd like to show you 3 examples, and then we'll move to some best practices. But the 3 examples are going to be mainly from our community. And the first one will look at combining multiple visualizations in a Visin Tooltip. And you'll see how important the formatting of the markup and the tooltip itself plays an important part into actually what appears into the tooltip. So we're going to try and build some sort of dashboard in the Visin Tooltip.
What? A dashboard in the, okay. We'll let Gat do this, but just so you remember, we're aiming for performance, and he will actually tell you what you need and shouldn't do for performance. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, so she's being annoying now, but I think she's actually a lot nicer with the Tableau community, so don't be scared to connect with her if you want to build some stuff. So indeed, the thing is, putting a dashboard in the Viz and Tooltip is not necessarily a best practice, because if you think of what a dashboard is people will spend some time reading the dashboard, potentially clicking and drilling down and asking kind of questions and using the interactivity of a dashboard. Whereas on the other hand, Viz and Tooltips is meant to give you instant feedback on what you're hovering above on. So this is why performance is quite important, but it's also just for getting instant information rather than providing more drillable features. So anyways, to show you how formatting can help you with putting multiple visualizations and adding a lot of context within a Viz and Tooltip, I've got a few sheets here. The first one, obviously, this sheet here, we just have a word cloud with the crimes and in the different districts, and that is defined by the size and the color. Then I have some information on crimes over year, types of crimes, and these are the top 10 types of crimes, and then top 10 districts based on number of crimes. So back to my word cloud, first of all, you can see that when I hover above each of these districts, I've got this dynamic tooltip that's already appearing. So everybody's familiar with this. It's a simple, just insert either the measures or the dimensions that are within your mark area. The next thing I want to do is I'd like to add a very simple row divider between the title and then the sheets that will come below. So if you think of your dashboard and having a title at the top, it's just formatting, having a little row divider that will divide each of the sections within the tooltip. The trick for this is just having an empty sheet. So this sheet I called row divider is completely empty. There's literally nothing there. And then if I go into my tooltip, and let's go down one line, and I'm going to insert that. My row divider is here. Now I can actually just make the width, I'll make it 500 in this case. So 500 is the maximum width I'll have available for any of the sheets that I'm going to add beneath each other or side by side. And then I'm just going to make this 9 because I want a small, nice little line to appear. So as you can see now, I've got this nice little line right underneath, which makes a nice separation between the two. OK, so moving on to my next sheet. I'm going to insert the types of crimes over year, or the number of crimes over year. And again, I'm going to match the max width here with the max width of my row divider. So I can make it show a preview. Maybe I'll make the height a little bit smaller, like 250. And notice that I'm constantly using this preview button. It's really important. It'll give you, instant feedback on what you're building, so you don't have to click OK, go in the sheet, and go back in the tooltip. So it's just a little shortcut. Next, I want to add a second row divider. Something to know here is that you cannot add a sheet twice. So as you can see, the row divider here is shaded because I've used it already. So if you want to add a sheet a second time, you can just copy and paste that. Thank you. I'll definitely take that back. All right, so now we've got a second row divider. All right, so now a much more boring trick is putting them side by side, putting two sheets side by side. So I know I've got my top 10 crimes and top 10 district areas. So let's take the crimes, and then I'm going to put and add that immediately behind it, the district areas. So actually the trick here, I'm just going to make this bigger so you can see properly, is that we need to make sure that there's no space between the two sheets. So right now, as you can see, this is where the two sheets separate, and there's no space. I completely separated that. The other thing as well is to make sure that the sum of the max width of these two sheets is not bigger than the max width of my row divider or the limit. So it's 500, and at the moment, it's set to max width 300, so I need to make sure that 250 plus 250 obviously is going to be the 500. All right, so let's have a quick preview. So now as you can see, we have two sheets side by side. And so when I hover above each of the marks, now it's not looking very well, I'll tell you why, but you can see that it's starting to make sense. The reason why we actually have some issues here, as you can see, when I hover above a specific district, then in that district I just have two sub-districts. I think that's how they're called. Something that I actually had within my view in the types of crimes and district area was top 10 crimes. So I had a top 10 filter. I'll just show you the filter quickly. So it was a top 10 filter to show the top 10 crimes. And what it is doing now, it's filtering for the overall top 10 crimes, where what I want to do is actually add a context filter so it gets the top 10 crimes within the district that I'm hovering above on. To do that, as you can see, I have this tooltip action filter that's been added automatically when I added the tooltip in the previous sheet. And so I just need to add this to context and do the same thing in my district area, where I can add that to my context. Also, I just like to make some cleanup. I'm just going to remove that. This is not necessary, but just so it looks a bit cleaner. And let's have a look now. If I hover above a district, now it's a lot cleaner, and I've got this filter happening in advance.
All right, so just to insist a bit on this context filter thing, you may, if you're not familiar with what this is and why the problem happens, you may want to go to some level of details sessions, because that's all about order of operations. And what happened before is that it was taking first the top 10, and then if a district didn't have any in the top 10, any sub-district in the top 10, then nothing was showing. So by putting the filter, the tooltip filter first, it was first filtering on the district, and then it would take the top 10 within the district with all the district areas.
Thank you, Jade. So yeah, this is just an example of how you can use multiple visualizations in a tooltip. You always have to be careful, obviously with how much you put in there. You really want people to be able to understand the context and get it as quickly as possible. So, I'd recommend against doing this sort of thing, but it's just I wanted to show you.
To show off.
Something else, and another example with that is one that comes from our community, actually, from Jeffrey Schaefer. He's one of the Tableau Jedis, I think, and he's got a blog called, his blog is called Science Plus Data, and he's written an article on Viz and Tooltip called Another 10 Viz and Tooltips Tips. And in this case, what he's doing is he actually created this visualization within the tooltip that is not the sort of viz that you typically see in Tableau. So it's something that you could potentially build in a dashboard. But if you imagine in the dashboard, you'd have to put multiple sheets around each other, and it'll be a bit complicated. Whereas in the Viz and Tooltip, it's synchronized pretty well. To do this, he's got three sheets. So the first one is the incidents per weekday. And actually, just to go back here, to give you an example of, or to show you what's in there, we have the cross sections between the month and then the weekdays, and these are number of crimes. And then we have the aggregated values as columns on the top and on the right-hand side. So we have the incidents by weekdays here as a bar chart, and then we have the heat map, which is the week and month, and then the incident by month as a lateral bar chart. Notice that most of the noise around these charts is removed, so there's no column headers, there's no labels, there's no guidelines in the background, so it's just really clean visualizations. Now the way you actually do this here, I'm going to just remove and rebuild it progressively. First of all, we have the first bar chart that's added, so pretty simple so far. Then we have the second sheet that's added. Let's remove that. Right below it. And so you see it aligned perfectly like you would expect it would. And then finally, we have this last sheet. So this last sheet is put side by side, so like I showed you in the previous example. And the other thing as well that he did is actually create a slight indent of 20 pixels on the height. And the reason is because if you look here, we have the title for the for the weekday. And so all the way at the top here, of a top right-hand side, we just want it to be slightly lower, so then it doesn't align with the title of the weekdays. So just remember that this is you need to create that small indent. So yeah, so that's a pretty interesting example I thought I'd want to show you. Okay, so moving on to one final example, I believe. Yep, that's it. So over here, we're actually using data from New Orleans Police Department. These are exact locations of crimes, which the Berlin Police Department didn't want to share with us, so we're just using that. And over here, there's a lot of points here. We have about 68,000 marks, so very dense data. And what I'd like to do is when I hover above one of these points, I want the Viz and Tooltip to zoom into a rounded area around where I'm hovering above, so I can see the crimes around in those specific streets, and obviously I can add more detail in the map to show street names, etc., etc. So this is actually an example that came also from the community from a man called Alan Eldridge. He used to work at Tableau, and now I think he's at Snowflake, and he's doing a lot of really interesting things with Tableau and Snowflake, and including this. So you can also see that on his blog. And this is actually he called it Magnify or Loupe tooltips. Loupe is magnify in French. And he's not French, he's Australian, but who knows. Anyway, so my second sheet now is the magnified Vision tooltip. So this sheet, there's no real difference, apart that the points are a little bit bigger, and I've added more detail to the map in the background. So this is just for the sake of when I'm zooming in, I'll have more detail. Okay, so back to my main sheets. I need to create a couple of calculations for this. The first one will be actually rounding the latitudes and the longitudes to 2 decimals. So you can imagine you can do this on a scatter plot as well, or any dense sort of data chart. And then it's just a matter of rounding the x and y coordinates. So to do that, I'll do a round latitude to 2 decimals. And I'll call this rounded latitude for those at the back. And obviously, you can see how to use this round, the round function here. You have some examples of how to use that for those of you who are familiar with that. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the longitude. Oops, just going to duplicate that. Duplicate. And I'm just going to replace latitude by longitude. And I'm going to rename that R long. Okay. Next, I just want to convert both of these as dimensions, because what's going to happen is we're going to use these 2 fields to filter the Vision tooltip. And so what I need to do is, because I want to use these in the tooltip, I'm just going to add them to my detail. So then I can add them within the tooltip code that I'm going to add here. So finally, I just need to add my sheet, and that's going to be my magnified Vision tooltip. For the sake of example, I'm just going to make it 500 times 500 so you can see well at the back. And then the filter fields will be both my R long and R lat. And just, if I want to filter on multiple fields, I just need to put a comma between the 2. So R lat, comma, R long. All right. So now, drum roll. If I hover above this point, now you can see it's actually zooming into that specific area and taking the rounded latitude and longitude. Thank you. All right, so hopefully these examples were interesting. We're going to share, obviously, this workbook and this content. We're going to share also the links to the blogs where you have descriptions on how to go through this step by step. And there's also going to be a recording, anyways, of this session that you can get on the website. I need to go back to the more boring part now, the best practices, and back to PowerPoint. But hopefully that was interesting. All right. Sorry? Oh, I need to go back. Okay. All right. 1 second. Perfect. All right, some best practices, do's and don'ts. First of all, in terms of design, we've seen some example of designing and adding multiple visualizations, etc. But some I guess rules of thumb. First of all, when you're using continuous axes in your visualizations that go in the Vision tooltips, these will scale very nicely. The continuous axes, they can stretch in and stretch out quite nicely, whereas the discrete axes, not as much. So they'll just be crunched down, and then you'll have all the numbers appearing, which will not be very nice. On the continuous axis, generally less than 200 pixels will actually look quite small, so we recommend making it above 200 and not above 600, which will take too much space on the screen. Like I said, the discrete axes, they do not scale as well. Also, the text will not automatically scale to the user-specified width and height. So text, the police and the size of the text will not change based on the height and that you set in the Vision tooltip. So remember that. Also, as a consequence of the 2 previous points, don't use lengthy text tables in Vision tooltips. Obviously, like I said, text and discrete will not scale, so this will look very strange if you have a very, very lengthy text table. Also, again, like I said, reconsider whether a Vision tooltip is a good candidate if it needs to be greater than 600 pixels. There's a lot of things you can do to go around that issue is, maybe create a separate dashboard, create actions between dashboards to take you to a different one. So quite a few things that you can do there. In terms of performance considerations, two things are important. The first is the rasterization performance. So rasterization is just the speed to draw the image. So the smaller and the fewer vises you have in the tooltip, the better speed you will get from that. Then complex vises, are generally not recommended due to rasterization complexity. So if you have a viz with 68,000 marks, like I had with the map earlier, this can cause potential rasterization slowness because we'll have to draw all 68,000 points, etc. Obviously, in the example I showed you, because I was filtering on the rounded latitude and longitudes, that was quite quick. And then the other thing to consider is the query performance, so the speed to retrieve the data. Now, Viz and Tooltip, they take advantage of Tableau's image cache, so it's very important to know. And the query delay can largely be bypassed by pre-caching the data, and that's what Jade showed you earlier, where she hid the sheet that we were going to use in the Viz and Tooltip in the background. And so because it was in the background, and when we arrived on that sheet or dashboard, it was preloaded, then when we're filtering on this, it's already all in there. So we're just taking an image and then filtering that image. So on caching, a previously accessed mark can simply be pull the PNG from the cache. So if you've used that mark previously, you can reuse it very quickly. And that will bypass both the query and the rasterization process because it's already been done, obviously. Caching is only on the server, so if on desktop you feel that it's a little bit slower than on server, that's normal. It's because we don't do caching on desktop. Server cache as well is invalidated on data refresh, so if the extract refreshes, that means basically we'll renew the cache. And then also server cache is per user. So this is not shared amongst multiple users for Viz and Tooltip specifically. This works for a lot of other caching concepts in Tableau. But for Viz and Tooltips, it's per user. So don't try to do hover over all the marks before all your employees coming in the morning and try to don't do that. It's not going to help. In terms of performance and responsiveness, VIT, so Viz and Tooltip performance is more about responsiveness than the raw time it actually takes. So how responsive it is when you hover over the mark. Users, they're generally willing to wait for a dashboard. They'll be more tolerant for a dashboard than for a slow tooltip. Like I said, it's supposed to be instant. So generally, the rules is less than 1 second is ideal, less than 2 seconds is borderline, and then anything higher is bad. So what can you do to achieve these? These are some recommendations of tricks to make them as performant as possible. So first of all, the caching trick, that's probably the best one to use, and the first one to use if you want to go and have complex vises and complex queries. And then obviously, go through the following. So reduce the complexity of the viz. Maps are generally longer to load just because we have lots of points to draw, but also we have the background map to load. And then remove any vises that have significant mark density. If you have a very, very dense scatter plot, that'll be a little bit harder to draw. Reduce the number of vises as well, and then reduce the size of the vises. So on this note, I'll hand over to Jade, so she'll summarize some of the key learnings from this session.
So just the key takeaways, you remember that Viz and Tooltip is great for adding more context without cluttering your dashboard, especially when it's maybe not something that everyone wants to see, but just a few people. You don't want to use real estate of your dashboard for that. It's an image combined with a filter action just to remember how it works, and it might help you to get creative to know that. You can really customize the markup, and there is this little trick of setting a size of 1 by 1 to pass the filters because they're not passed in the calculation. And because we're nice people, we made this summary slide, so you can print it out and maybe stick it on your desktop. You have the markup with all the parts that are customizable, and it reminds you how to use the dimensions if you don't want to filter on all fields. With all the tricks that we saw today, and of course you will have the links about the tutorials. This session would not have been possible without the amazing Tableau community, because almost all of these examples were first born in the crazy creative minds of People like Jeffrey Schaffer, Matt Chambers, he did the swap Visin tooltip where you can click or hover. I forgot to mention that, I'm really sorry, but that came from Matt Chambers. Alan Eldridge, Sarah Bartlett, and if you follow on Twitter, set actions, Visin tooltips, this kind of new features, you will see what people can create with this. And for performance, just to summarize the last part, you don't want your Visin tooltip to be slow, because people might not even realize that there is a Visin tooltip. Like when I did my zoom on the district area, it was taking so long that I thought it didn't work. So make sure it's smooth and loads fast enough. And so remember, no maps, no dense charts. Try to simplify your visits if they're not loading fast enough. This session will be repeated this afternoon, so if you've liked it, we would really appreciate if you can share, spread the word
or
to
come
your
back.
colleagues. Or welcome back if you don't know what to do from 2:30 to 3:30. There is, as usual, feedback part in the app, and we would really love to hear your feedback, be it positive or negative, so we can improve the content of this session. This being said, we have 7 minutes left before the next session, so I think if you have some questions, we can take one or two, and there is one at the back.